What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. We got our first bit of game action last night with Bills at Rams, but the rest of week one is almost here. So I figured it'd be fun to take a look at each game and tell you guys how I think each one is going to play out. If I don't get to your specific player in this one, I think I will. I'm going to go over every single game, but if I happen to not do that, I'll go over even more players tomorrow, and you can also see my exact rankings on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, for also different scoring formats. I spent like 8-9 hours yesterday going like deep into all the projections, and I feel really good about them right now, so you can definitely check that out again, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So with that, let's go over every single game this week. First up, Ravens at Jets. This game has a low-ish 44.5 point total. Actually, a lot of games this week with like a lower total. It's a little bit weird. There's actually not a lot in the middle. So we've got a lot of games with like 42, 43, 44, and then some games with like 52, 53, 54, and there's not as many things, again, in that like 47 to 48, 49 range. But again, 44.5 point total, Ravens at Jets. Jets are 7-point home underdogs. Whenever you see a 7-point home underdog, you know it is not looking great for that team. I would very much expect the Ravens to control this game throughout, and even if the Jets were to get lucky early in the game, get a quick score, maybe two quick scores, the Ravens should have no problem regaining that lead and then maintaining it. Two notes on this game. One, I'm currently expecting Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake to get the vast majority of the running back work. I don't think Dobbins is going to play, but even if he does, I think Davis and Drake are getting most of that work. The issue is that Mike Davis is bad, and Kenyon Drake, wasn't even on the team 2 weeks ago. So how much can he really be involved? This is also a spot where Baltimore can very easily win through the air, and I really think that they're going to lean on Bateman, lean on Mark Andrews a lot. I'm going to talk about them a little bit more in depth in tomorrow's video, really just how much I like them. But I think Bateman and Andrews are set up in just smash spots this week. You were obviously starting Mark Andrews every week, but I think if you've got Bateman, you are absolutely playing him this week because, again, I really don't think they can trust the running backs on this team, and they can find success through the air. It'd be one thing if they could only run the ball, against their opponent, but this is the Jets. They can throw the ball, they can run it, they can do really whatever they want. I think they're going to choose to throw it, and so I would really want this passing attack in my lineups, not really the running backs. As for the Jets, they're unlikely to get much going. So basically, I have no interest in anyone that is not Elijah Moore. Get Elijah Moore, you can play him. I'm projecting 2.01 offensive touchdowns for the Jets. It's a really low total. They're probably not going to play well even at home. It's going to be a split between Carter and Breece Hall. I don't want anyone. If it's not Elijah Moore, I don't want anyone on that roster. Next up, Colts at Texans. Another game with a home team being a 7-point underdog. You don't see it that often, but there's actually a lot. Like the highest spreads this week are actually road teams. There's a ton of really heavy road favorites. Again, not a typical week as far as that's concerned. But we can expect the Colts to pretty easily dominate on the ground in this one. Awful news if you are a Texans fan, if you have Texans players, honestly. This should be a game where Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, they can really get whatever they want. And while the Colts will be efficient through the air, it's not like they can't throw the ball against the Texans. It's just going to be so easy for them to run it that they'll use the run in play action to kind of set up the pass, but it's not going to be a game where they're going to see high volume through the air. So if you've got Colts pass catchers, understand they're going to need to be efficient. I still think you're starting Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. I don't really see a scenario where obviously you're not benching Jonathan. Jonathan Taylor might just go nuclear this week. But for Pittman, I don't really see a scenario where you're benching him unless you want RB0 and you're like, oh, but Nick, I have 4 wide receiver ones or something like that. Unless that's the case, you're just playing Pittman. Just understand he's probably not going to have a huge amount of targets. He's probably going to need to be relatively efficient, which honestly against this defense, it probably can be. I like the potential again for the Texans this season, but it's a really bad spot 2.16 projected touchdowns for them compared to 3.11 for the Colts. You're going to hear me reference that just like a few times in this video, but there's just like a number of teams this week that have like 2 or even less than 2 projected touchdowns. And if we're not expecting the touchdowns to be scored, we're not expecting them to be efficient on offense, we're expecting the Colts to be able to run the ball easily and thus drain the clock a lot, it just doesn't set up very well for Texans players. So again, Taylor, Pittman, start them. I think Brandon Cooks and Dameon Pierce are perfectly fine to play in the flex because they're going to have, a big share of the volume for the Texans, but they are not players that you're jamming into lineups. I think they're fine. I don't think they're elite plays. Next up, Steelers at Bengals, 44-point total. Bengals, 4.5-point home favorites. For the Bengals, we've got a fantastic offensive line. We've got a team playing at home, and a team that's pretty clearly better than their opponent. There's definitely a chance that the Steelers, given all their playmakers, because they have really good skill players and like a lot of really good skill players, not just like 1 or 2, it's definitely possible they're able to keep this game close and maybe only lose like 24-28, something like that. But my guess is that the Bengals offense is just too good and that their defense is able to slow Trubisky because while the skill players are good, Trubisky's not all that good. So I would imagine, since he gets up early, is able to run the ball a ton in the second half and finds a lot of success because they have a good offensive line. And it's an area where they can find success given the talent of their roster and the fact that, the Steelers will never be able to like load the box against Mixon because you've got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on the outside. So sets up like a game where the passing offense is going to look fantastic early and can be like highly efficient. It's going to look like they're going to hit these like true ceilings, but they'll probably again be up in the second half. And the Bengals are a team that is perfectly willing to sit on that lead. If they're up, 14, 17 points in the second half, run the ball at a pretty high rate. And if they're going to be very efficient in doing that, maybe we don't see a true ceiling hit for Chase and Higgins. Now, you're starting Chase, you're starting Higgins, you're starting again Mixon, Burrow, you're starting all of them. I just think relative to like the draft cost, I guess, where you drafted them in fantasy, I think Mixon owners will come out of this one the happiest. On the Steelers side, always start Najee Harris. You don't have to have me go over that one. I actually have them projected only 1.95 projected touchdowns this week. That is worse than the Jets, worse than the Texans. So I'm not thinking they're going to be all that good this week. I would be down on most of their players, and honestly, Najee Harris is probably the only one I would want to start. You can play Deontay Johnson in the flex. I would prefer not to. Next up, we've got 49ers at Bears. And what do you know? Another game with a 7-point home underdog. 49ers defensive line is going to swallow up the Bears offensive line. It is unlikely the Bears are going to be able to stop the 49ers on the ground. We should see a lot of Elijah Mitchell and very limited passing volume overall. That is the one concern. Now, the outlook for Brandon Ayuk is going to change if Kittle is out because now you take an offense that had 3 players getting most of the targets and you make it 2 players getting most of the targets. So now, if it's only Ayuk and Debo, we can feel really good about both of them because such a high percentage of targets are going there. If Kittle plays, it definitely mutes my interest. And honestly, both Kittle, because he's a little bit banged up and they're going to run a ton, and also Ayuk, because while Ayuk will be efficient, have a nice downfield role, it's like I don't expect very many targets in this game because, again, they're going to be able to run the ball a ton. And you have to think if they get up by 10, 13, 14 points by halftime, and there's going to be so many rush attempts that you're going to need a touchdown from Kittle, you're going to need a touchdown from Brandon Ayuk. So you're playing Debo, you're definitely playing Elijah Mitchell. I think if you drafted Kittle, in round 5-6, you just have to play him if he's active. But Ayuk could probably be one where you'd usually maybe want to be starting him, but I don't know if I do that this week. For the Bears, Montgomery and Mooney should have a large enough opportunity share amongst the whole offense to where even though I really don't like the Bears offense this week, lowest projected touchdown total of any team this week for my projections, 1.74. Not expecting good production. You basically are going to need a touchdown from one of them to pay off. But like I said, I think both will have a large enough share of the offense where I'm good playing either of them in the flex. That's probably all I'd want to do. It's likely you might have to play Montgomery at running back 2, in which case, it's not the end of the world. Just understand, I don't expect good things for the Bears offense this week. Next up, Patriots at Dolphins, 46.5 point total, 3.5 point home favorites for the Dolphins. I actually like the under in this spot. It's not really a spot I want to attack anywhere. The Patriots offense did not look good in camp, and while sometimes that happens and teams still go out there and perform really well, I think there's merit to the fact that they just haven't been able to do a whole lot. Now, they have a good defense. The Dolphins have a really good defense. And so it's like this game sets up to one where it's like they're divisional opponents. They know each other. And while both offenses are going to be different than in previous years, they still know each other. They still know each other's tendencies. And so it sets up to me like a game that's going to be kind of gross. There's going to be maybe a lot of punts early on that both teams aren't going to really be able to find their footing. And so I don't really want ancillary players. I think you're starting Tyreek Hill every week. And I would say all of Waddle, Stevenson, Edmonds, Harris are going to be involved enough in the offense where they're all perfectly fine to throw into the flex spot, hope for a touchdown, hope for a busted long play. But it's not a game environment where I expect things to pop off. And I think it's pretty likely the 4 players I just mentioned that are all kind of flex worthy. I think it's pretty likely 2 of them bust. 2 of them just don't really do all that much. I have no idea which 2 it's going to be. I don't think anyone does. And so it's play Tyreek Hill. If you have an option for these other players that you could bring them out and put someone else in the flex in that you really do like, I'd probably go that direction. I really just don't love this game in general. We've got a fun one up next. Not usually a fun one, but it's Browns at Panthers. And you're like, well, what? How is that fun? Baker wants to steamroll the Browns. I feel did I even say the game right? Browns at Panthers? I feel like I said Jets or something. I don't know. Whatever I said. Browns at Panthers. Baker, you look at the comments, this dude wants to go out there and throw 7 touchdowns. Now, unfortunately, he does play for the Panthers. And so, the most likely outcome is not that Baker goes out there, throws for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. Certainly possible. Baker feels like the kind of guy who really wants that to happen. And it seems like, if he gets rolling, which again, he's on the Panthers, so he's probably not going to get rolling. But if he were to, the team's obviously going to let him keep going, right? Now, the Panthers are 1.5 point home favorites. The total's pretty low, 42 points. I think the Browns are the better team. And so if there was no narrative here, I do think the Browns would be 1 to 2 point road favorites. I think because of the narrative, it's kind of, shifted the line a little bit more towards the Panthers. But the Browns are the better team. The Browns should be able to just run the ball, keep giving it to Chubb, give it to Kareem Hunt, and just continue ground and pound. Throw occasionally, throw on play action, throw on, of course, obvious passing downs. But for the most part, I think they want to run the ball. And I think they'll be relatively successful in doing that. So I wouldn't be surprised if this turns into a game where Chubb's running it, McCaffrey's running it. The Panthers are fine on offense, but aren't that great. They're kind of moving up and down the field a little bit, not scoring too much. And you get to the fourth quarter and it's, 17-20. And the team of 20's up, and they're just running it. And it feels like a game that could just be kind of not that great. Fortunately for us, let's be honest, there's not that many players on these offenses that we have a ton of interest in. And the high end is an obvious start. So you're starting McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and Nick Chubb. I really don't care what the matchup is, you're starting them. And then if you've gotten Njoku, you need to play him at tight end, go for it. It's a tight end that's going to get 4 to 6 targets. Hopefully he scores. That's what all those guys are. But outside of that, it's not like there's very many fringe players in this game anyways. And so whether it pops off, doesn't pop off, you're starting the same players. Kareem Hunt is just do you need him? Right? If you don't need him, don't play him. Not a spot where I really expect a high Kareem Hunt total. But yeah, it's a game where you don't want ancillary players, but they don't really have any. So it's not, the end of the world. Eagles at Lions up next. This game has a higher 49 point total. Eagles are only 4 point road favorites. Kind of speaking to what we've talked about over the offseason, that the Lions are actually a decent team and definitely underrated by the public. I think the public would go into this game expecting, the Lions to be maybe 6 or 7 point underdogs against the Eagles, with how much hype there's been about the Eagles. But again, it's only 4 points. Now, this one actually has a wide range of outcomes. Either team could get up early and force the other one to throw at a higher rate, and both offenses are pretty good. And so we could see a back and forth game here, which, as a viewer, obviously, we'd love to see. Like, we would love to see one team get up 10-0 in the first 2 drives and then seeing like a back and forth aerial attack. And you'd probably want the Lions to be that team that gets up early. But know this, both teams have like top 5, top 7 offensive lines. Both would prefer to be a little bit more run heavy than your average team. And if neither team pulls out to like a 2-score lead early on, we could see a back and forth game where both teams are running it more than people expect, which will lead to fewer overall plays and fewer fantasy points, obviously, because a carry is the worst thing that can happen in fantasy, right? If you're fading a game, you want carries. There's no reception. There's less of a chance of a touchdown. There's less potential yardage. Like, it's just not, I guess, potential yardage, but there's less average yardage in that play. Like, a 5-yard carry is half a point for one player, and it might take 40 seconds off the clock. So if that keeps happening, you're not going to get these spikes. Ultimately, you're starting Swift, you're starting Amon-Ra St. Brown and Hockenson. For the Lions, for the Browns, you're starting A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. No matter how the game turns out, I think you have to start those players. Miles Sanders and Devonta Smith are more like flex plays. Really comes down to what your team looks like and which game outcome you expect to happen. If you really do think this game pops off and it's back and forth, start both of them. They're talented players, large role in the offense. They're going to be good. If you have other players and you're like, I kind of agree this might be more of a ground and pound game, don't play them. Again, it really just comes down to what does your bench look like. 8th game on our list, Saints at Falcons. This one is a low. 42-point total. Saints, 5.5-point road favorites. Falcons are going to have some good games this year. In future years, there's potential there, right? This week, I'm not seeing it. The Saints have an extremely strong defense. They should be able to take Drake London out of the game if they want to. I don't know that they will. Maybe they'll focus more on Pitts, but whatever they want to do, they'll be able to do. This is the first game that we're going to be seeing Marcus Mariota under center. And really the only one on this entire offense I would start is Kyle Pitts. For the Saints, they're likely going to be more pass heavy than people think on average, but there's no reason to think they're going to air it out this week. They just don't have to. Now, I see the 5.5-point total, and I'm like, maybe I'm wrong here, but it feels like the Saints should very easily be able to control the game. And it's like the only way they kind of don't is if they make mistakes in the passing attack. So they should be pretty balanced, run the ball, be conservative on offense, which again, on average, I don't think is going to happen. I do think they're going to be more aggressive and more pass heavy, but it's not a game where they need to be that way to win. And so Michael Thomas, fine. Olave, fine in deeper formats, but honestly, I think you're starting Kamara and like Thomas is like a flex play. But other than that, I mean, there's not a lot of interest in this game. I really don't think it's that one that I really want to attack. We've got a riveting game up next between the Jaguars and the Commanders. 44-point total. Commanders, 2.5-point home favorites. Most likely outcome, gross overall. I mean, neither team has an elite defense. So you could be like, oh, won't the offenses run back and forth? Not really, just because they're uninspiring offenses. They're just not teams that we're expecting, explosive games from. If you are trying to attack this spot, I think you're just sticking to the guys that we know. You're starting Etienne, you're starting McLaurin, you're starting Gibson. We know they're going to have a good role in the offense. We know they're going to be solid. I think Kirk, I think Dotson are really interesting cheap plays in DFS, and it's certainly possible one of them ends up on my DraftKings roster this week. But I don't think either one of them is a must. I think Kirk is the one where more people will be willing to play him, and you guys know that decision I have, him versus Devonta Smith. I'm going with Christian Kirk. I have him ranked as a wide receiver 27 last time I looked. I believe it's the same right now. But that one, it just so much depends on what you have. If he was like your 5th wide receiver, there's no reason to play Christian Kirk this week. If he's your 4th wide receiver, like he is for me, and maybe you want to play him in that second flex spot, I think that is absolutely fine. I think the target share is going to be there. I think the upside is there because also, the Jaguars could be a solid, at least okay offense. And so Kirk would be the one I have most interest in there. But again, it's not a game where you want a ton of players in. Final 1 o'clock game. Giants at Titans. 43.5 point total. 5.5 point home favorites for the Titans. Titans are at home. Titans are favored. Don't have A.J. Brown anymore. Facing a poor run defense. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Like, this is an explosion spot for Derrick Henry. It doesn't mean he's going to have one of his 153 touchdown games, but it means they're going to lean on him. He's probably going to be good, and that's probably how the game is going to go. My interest for, all other Titans players is not that high. It's going to be a low volume passing game. They have an ambiguous target share heading into week 1, so I would avoid all non-Derrick Henry Titans players. For the Giants, it means they're going to be behind, likely. Maybe they have fewer plays overall. If Henry's going to get maybe 25 to 30 touches in this game, that can slow the clock. That can make it, so that the Giants have less offensive opportunities. But they want to throw the ball anyways. It could be consolidated depending on who plays. Check the injury report before this game. I would say Saquon's an obvious start. Tony and Wan'Dale are interesting, but I would say for most of you in a season-long format, you probably don't need to go to Tony or Wan'Dale this week. Let's see how it plays out. I think they're very interesting on DraftKings. They're like 4,100 and 3K flat. So they're guys I might use this week, but in season-long, I don't know. I think I want to watch this Giants offense for everyone that is not Saquon. Start Saquon. Everyone else, probably not. 4 o'clock games. All good. Honestly, from this point on, every single game is going to be awesome. Packers at Vikings, 47 point total. Vikings, 1.5 point home favorites. This game is going to attract a lot of attention, but there's one thing that could have me concerned. Packers want to play slow, right? Especially with their wide receiver core and, their limited wide receiver core being banged up right now with Lazard maybe not playing. So you have that. You've got a total that's dropping now down to 47. If Green Bay gets up early and Minnesota struggles at all, which is possible because the Packers have a pretty good defense, then we might see limited total plays from both sides, which would cause many players to disappoint. So if you have players in this game, the last thing you want to see is for the Vikings to start off, go 3 and out. Packers to kick a field goal, Vikings to be inefficient again, punt the ball, Packers to score. That is not what you want to see. Now the Packers are up. They're going to be bleeding the play clock down to 1-2 seconds every play. They're going to run the ball a ton, and you're going to need the Vikings to catch up. But there's a flip side here. If the Vikings are able to find success early on and force Green Bay to air it out a little bit more and to play a little bit faster, this game can shoot out. So this game still has 34-30 in its range of outcomes where we have smash spots from everyone in this game. But again, we don't know which one is going to happen. It really depends on what starts out in the game. I think you're starting Jefferson, starting Dalvin Cook, starting Adam Thielen, and Irv Smith on the Vikings side, and then both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon for the Packers. I think because of the potential of this game, you just have to do that. Lazard's the one question mark, and my answer really comes down to health. Hopefully it's a 4 o'clock game, so hopefully we know Sunday morning exactly what's going to happen. If he's active and good to go, I think you're playing him in the flex. If he's inactive, it really just makes it so that if you have either of the running backs, you're definitely playing them, but I would still stay away from all Packers wide receivers. I think it would be a big rotation. Watkins would be the one that rises the value the most, but it'd be a big rotation. I wouldn't want to attack it. Next up, Raiders at Chargers, 52.5 point total. Chargers, 3.5 point home favorites. This is another one that is kind of tough to figure out exactly how it's going to play out, but it honestly doesn't really matter. No matter how this game plays out, what you think happens, you're starting Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams for the Chargers, Adams and Waller for the Raiders. The only decision points in this game really comes down to Jacobs and Hunter Renfrow. I personally would not play Jacobs in week 1. I want to see what the split is. I don't trust him enough to where I want to play him, so I would keep him on the bench. And for Renfrow, it does a little bit come down to how you see this game playing out. I think there's a chance that we see both teams really air it out, in which case, you're going to see 7, 8, maybe 9 targets to Renfrow, and it'd be worthwhile in the flex. One thing with Renfrow is the ceiling's not really there, so if you're a big underdog, maybe don't play Renfroe in the flex because he's probably not going to score like 25 points. Maybe play someone else who has a higher ceiling because we're just not going to see Renfroe go out there and have 12 targets, which is something he needs to hit like a true 25-point ceiling unless he gets super lucky with touchdowns. The final 4 o'clock game, Chiefs at Cardinals. Highest total game of the season so far, 54 points, and the Chiefs are 6-point road favorites, which is a pretty impressive line. I honestly don't have a great feel for exactly how this game's going to play out, but it could very easily turn into the game of the week. And so if you're on the fence about a player in this game and a player in another game, you probably just want to start the player in this game. Personally, I think all of Kelsey, Juju, Marquise Brown, James Conner are must plays. I would get them into your starting lineup, with Clyde being perfectly fine to use in the flex spot. Not someone you need to start because I don't really know what his involvement is going to be. I'm not like 100% convinced he's the clear one. But again, if it's between Clyde and someone else projected very similarly and ranked similarly to him, well, Clyde's in this game, which could pop off for like 60 points. And so I'd probably want to just play Clyde. But it's those other players that are more just DFS plays for me. MVS, Hardman, Rondell Moore, Sky Moore, like any of them can get loose deep. Any of them could have like 4 for 150 and 2 touchdowns. But for us to sit here and say that we know it's going to be MVS this week, or Hardman, or Moore, or the other Moore, like I think they're reserved for GPPs on DraftKings. I don't think you can play them in a season-long format unless it's like 16 teams with multiple flex spots. Sunday night game, Bucks at Cowboys. This game has a 51-point total. Bucks 2.5-point road favorites. And to be honest, this one's similar to the last game. Like, you know, you're starting your studs: Evans, Leonard Fournette, Lamb, and Schultz. Like you just know you're starting those players. What it comes down to is these running backs in the flex spot. I actually think both Zeke and Pollard are flex viable this week. I shared my thoughts on the Monday video, so check that one out if you want a deeper look at those two. But I think you're playing both of them in the flex. And these other players, basically, like I don't want any ancillary players other than like the core 4 on Dallas. And then when you go to Tampa Bay, it depends on Godwin. I honestly don't think Godwin plays, but even if he does play, he's not going to be 100%. So you're not starting Godwin. Don't have him in your starting lineup. I don't know that you're even starting anyone else, though. If you have to play Julio or Gage, you know, if Godwin is confirmed out, I think they're both fine. They're going to get good volume, but I would want them to be confirmed out, and I just don't know that, or I want Godwin obviously to be confirmed out. I don't know that we're going to get that news before 1 o'clock, and so for me to sit here in a week with no buys and limited injuries, saying that you're going to start Julio or Gage in your flex, it's like, well, who are you starting them over? Like that you probably got them in round like 9 or 10, so that's 8 different players. Like, unless you have multiple flex spots, you've got a really, I guess deep starting lineup, you got a ton of starting players, you probably just don't have to do that. But again, it would be fine if we get Godwin out. Final game of the week is a fun one. Denver at Seattle. Russ returns to Seattle right away. Good on the schedule makers for making that happen. And I think he's going to rip apart the Seahawks defense. I don't think this game is going to be close. I think Russ wants to throw for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns. We're not projecting that to happen, but I think it's in the range of outcomes. You're starting Sutton, you're starting Judy, you're starting Javonte Williams, you're starting Russell Wilson, obviously. Melvin Gordon, honestly fine as a desperation play at running back 2 if you need it. For Seattle, I don't think Ken Walker is going to be active this week. I think he's going to be inactive. And so I would honestly plan on starting Penny, and I have him in one of my 3 leagues. I am just planning on starting Rashad Penny this week because the expected volume, if Walker's out, is massive. But aside from that, you can start Metcalf, you can start Lockett as high upside flex options. But we went over that in, I believe, the Wednesday video this week. You play them in a game where you need that production. You need 30 points. But both of them have a floor of 3 this week and a ceiling of 30. And so if you are favored to win and you don't need the upside, you don't want to risk a 3-point performance from this player, don't play either of them. But if you're the underdog, you need the potential to score 25, 30 points. Well, they have that in the range of outcomes. Either one of them can have 150 and 3 touchdowns. So if you need that upside, play them. I don't have them in any leagues, so I can't tell you what I'm doing, but I would prefer not to. So that is the end of this very long breakdown of every single game in week 1. I'll be back tomorrow to go over my favorite plays this week, and I'll have another underdog pick'em for you guys for week 1. Remember, my exact rankings for week 1 up on the website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So if you have any further questions, my rankings will answer those. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting the like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.